Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. BAM Weather Meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. I hope y'all are doing well this morning. We've got an updated forecast out through the end of September and into the start of October. It's going to warm up in a big way over the next couple of weeks, but I do see another change in the cards down the road. I think there's the potential for a stronger cold front as we work towards the end of September, and we are going to talk about that as we go throughout this video. First and foremost, though, the next 2 weeks warmer than normal, especially for the central part of the country. I do think there can be some cooler air that lingers on the East Coast, the West Coast in the short term, maybe even a little bit of a reinforcing cold front into the weekend, but you can see the ag belt here into the Canadian prairies much above normal over the next 7 days, and really that lingers all the way into the week 2 time frame. Core of the warmth with time will start to shove a little bit further to the east, but much above normal temperatures right over the Mississippi River Valley region, which is what we've talked about. This region in here being hot and dry ahead, allowing for drought conditions to worsen and expand. In terms of moisture opportunities, guys, over the next 7 days, messy rainfall opportunities across the north central part of the country, especially parts of Montana and the western Dakotas. As we roll into the week 2 time frame, really more of the same. I think the plains, especially the western plains, much above normal with precipitation. Eastern third of the United States continuing to run drier than normal. Not a major change there in terms of precipitation. In terms of temperatures, let's go through this to highlight the increasingly more summer-like temperatures that will be returning to the forecast here. This is as we work into Wednesday. You can see some 90s beginning to return all the way into Illinois and Missouri. By the time we work into Thursday and Friday, we're looking at mid to maybe even some upper 90s across parts of Missouri, Illinois, along the Mississippi River here down into Arkansas. I see some 90s up into Iowa and Illinois, upper 80s into Indiana. As we work into your weekend, you can see 90s all the way up into Iowa, central Illinois, into parts of western Indiana. And so a much warmer than normal pattern returning here as we go throughout the rest of this week. And I do see a difference compared to the previous heat waves that we had. A lot of the heat that we had this summer was accompanied by very humid, oppressive, high moisture air. That is not the case with this air mass. This air mass is quite a bit drier, much less humid. It's going to allow the soil moisture to continue to dry out. So again, if you are struggling for moisture right now, especially if you're in the eastern ag belt and down through the deep south along the Mississippi River, it's probably only going to get worse over the next 7 to probably 15 days or so. Taking a look kind of day by day in terms of how we expect this pattern to evolve, let's go out and skip out to the end of the week 1 time frame. You can see widespread above normal temperatures, much above normal temperatures, as we roll into early next week. And if anything, guys, this will just continue to linger throughout next week, beginning to maybe shift a little bit further to the east by the following weekend, the 20th of the month or so. What you will start to see happen is the core of our warmth start to shift more so to the eastern third of the country and maybe begin to build back in some cooler air across the western plains. This is the start of what I think will be a transition towards the end of September, but I do think it's going to take a little bit of time, and I think if anything, maybe the EPS is a touch fast, maybe a day or two fast. But I see a strong cold front signal around the 23rd to the 25th of the month, and if we jump out to day 14 and 15, around the 23rd, you can see the EPS trying to hint at cooler air returning to the plains. I think there's merit to it. Again, maybe it's a day fast, but I do think there's merit to this idea. Still warmer than normal in the eastern third of the country, though. The question that we will answer as we get into weeks 3 and 4 is, okay, how fast does the cooler air move in? Where does it return? Does it stick in the plains? Do we linger warmth in the east? It's something we're going to talk about with our weeks 3 and 4 forecast. I want to get to the root cause of the pattern right now, which in my opinion is the tropical forcing and our background state in the atmosphere, which is more La Nina-like. It's a weaker than normal global wind. It's what we call a negative AAM. When you combine the tropical forcing and the global winds, you get a pretty good picture of what the atmosphere is doing. You can see in the medium term, this is the 6 to 10 day time frame on the EPS on the bottom, versus the negative AAM and MJO phase 8, matches up pretty close, all things considered. We head into the 10 to 15 day time frame on the right. We're moving into MJO phase 1. matches up pretty good. Maybe a little bit cooler, more so into the southwest plains, but all things considered, it's a pretty good match all the way out through the end of week 2. In terms of the moisture aspect of things, as we get towards the end of week 2, as we see this transition, phase 1 is a wetter MJO phase. And you can see that if there's a time frame where we can start to shove some of this moisture further east, I think it's towards the end of week 2 and into the start of week 3. I think that there is a time frame that this area, which has been drier, can start to see more widespread moisture opportunities. Does it last that long? Skeptical of that, but late week 2 into the start of week 3, so towards the start of the last week of the month, probably getting more active across the eastern ag belt for a time. In terms of what happens beyond phase 1, we know that favors the warmth in the east, some cooler air further to the west in the western plains. As we get into phase 2 and then into phase 3, that's what's going to happen as we get into the end of September and the start of October. And so what does phase 2 indicate? Well, it favors the cooler air to come back. There's got to be a transition that happens here. Phase 1 and phase 2 are almost the opposite. But you can see there's data support for it. 10 to 15 day EPS warm east, cooler further to the north and to the west in the plains. GEFS weekly here between the 26th and the 1st of October brings cooler air in east and pushes the warmer air back west. So I think what is going to happen as we transition from week 2 into week 3, this cooler air that starts to build with our 23rd to 25th storm system slowly begins to migrate further to the east. I think that between, let's say, the 23rd and the 26th of the month, we likely see this cooler air slowly seep further down to the south into the east. And so the start of the last week of September, the start of the week 3 time frame, probably continuing to be warmer east. But that cooler air in the plains will grow, it will bleed further east, and by the time we work into the last couple of days of the month, let's say the 27th through the start of October, going to see that transition to cooler air settling in east and warmer air in the west. We also have support from that idea with a big SOI drop. You can see here around the 24th, 25th, it supports a big storm system, a big cold front in here, which favors this change happening. If we take a look at the North Pacific, it also favors, especially the last couple of days of September and the first couple of days of October, a warmer west pattern, maybe warmer central to west, and a cooler eastern United States setup. What does this mean in terms of precipitation? Well, as we touched on, I think that there's a window of opportunity as this transition happens, say 21st to the 26th of the month, somewhere in there, that this moisture can bleed further east. Areas that need some rain, parts of Illinois, parts of Missouri, parts of Indiana, probably get some rain. But it's short-lived, because as we start to feel the phase 2 influence, we're right back to the drier than normal pattern across the eastern part of the country, and the plains are right back to their active pattern. So it's an interlude, I think, in terms of a more active pattern rather than a consistent pattern change. And we can see this here on the EPS Weekly. It's trying to indicate this. This is between the 22nd and the 28th of the month that it has here. It has more of this moisture bleeding east, and then it goes back to the drier pattern, very similar to our analogs. In terms of MJO Phase 3, I think this is towards the very end, but there is the risk that towards the 4th, 5th, 6th of October, we could start to warm things back up. I know this is the September analog, but there aren't enough dates to use for October for this type of a setup, and just glancing at a couple of them, this should match up pretty well. The risk is that we warm back up late the first week of October or the second week of October. The GEFS doesn't do it until the second week of October, but you can see that it's hinting at it. So it's just a timing thing. I do think we warm back up and we get into a warmer October pattern as a whole, but there's a little bit of uncertainty of whether it happens the second week of October or towards the end of the first week of October. Regardless, I think that this is the evolution. We just have to fine-tune the timing a little bit as we get closer. And this is how we average it all out. Again, it's a little bit tricky because the start of the period, probably warmer east. Then we build in the cooler air. I do think the central to western U.S. can average warmer than normal, especially if we warm up at the end of the period. But I do think if there's a risk, and I'm going to watch that SOI closely, because if it can stay more negative, heading into the October correlation, there is a cooler risk through here, that it could be more widespread even with the cooler than normal conditions. In terms of precipitation, guys, again, start of the period more active further east, but right back to the dryness. That's how we average it out, with the eastern third staying dry and the western 2/3 being a little bit more active throughout this time frame. Last couple things before we go. Next widespread frost windows based off of this evolution, 23rd to the 26th across the plains. And then I think that as we move this pattern along, 27th to October 2nd, we need to watch out for a more widespread frost risk in here all the way down through parts of the Ohio Valley. And in terms of top analogs and how they do look into October, even with maybe a slightly cooler start, these years, they are warmer. And so I don't necessarily think that we are diving into a widespread colder than normal pattern throughout October, but I do think the month could start a bit cooler as a whole. Guys, that's all I have for today's forecast. If you have questions, as usual, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great day.